Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Make sure you check them out online at TuscaloosaToyota.com. We're glad you're with us for this show. We'll go ahead and start to take a look at some of the headlines for today, thanks to this smart board that's been provided to us by our friends at RJ Young. They are the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. First of all, coming up on the show today, three great conversations, starting with the head softball coach for the University of Alabama. Patrick Murphy will be along to preview what's coming up this weekend, not only for the Alabama softball team, but also coming up for him at the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame. Then we'll talk Crimson Tide baseball with outfielder Andrew Pinckney, who's been making headlines not only for his great home runs that he's hit this year, hitting for a high average, but also he's throwing out runners on the base paths left and right, whether at third, second, home. He has been excellent this year for the Tide. So we'll be talking with Andrew Pinckney in a bit. And then we'll start to wrap up our football coverage for the spring with Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News, who covers Alabama football, as we'll look back not only on the Golden Flake A-Day game and kind of what we learned about Alabama football during the spring, but also the NFL draft, as he had extensive coverage for the T-News on Alabama players in the NFL draft. Take a look at our headlines. We'll start with softball, and coming up this weekend for the Crimson Tide softball team, they'll be home against the Missouri Tigers to prepare for the final weekend of the regular season. As last weekend, Alabama did not play. The Crimson Tide had 3 games at Texas A&M, lost the first 2, also lost a midweek game to Western Kentucky. We'll talk about that with Coach Murphy, and then after a bit of time to reflect and get kind of a deep breath going into the stretch run coming up, Alabama will be at home against Missouri. Coming up on Senior Day, we're excited to celebrate Kaylee Towle with everything she's done for the Alabama softball program, so make sure you're there coming up for Senior Day at the Rhodes House, and we'll be talking all about this with Coach Murphy in just a few moments. Switching gears to another diamond sport that's also at home this graduation weekend. It's the Alabama baseball team, who last weekend went 0-3 at South Carolina. Some really tough losses for the Crimson Tide, especially the Thursday and Friday games of the series. 1-run losses, just tough to see that for Alabama. And the Crimson Tide did not play a midweek game at all. Interestingly enough, kind of like softball, also didn't have a game this past Sunday with that schedule against South Carolina moved up by a day. So a lot of time to rest and reflect for the Crimson Tide before the LSU Tigers come to town. A pivotal SEC West showdown. Alabama really needing some wins, really needing 2 wins this weekend to try and keep their NCAA tournament hopes alive. Friday at 6 p.m., Saturday at 7:30, Sunday coming up at 1 o'clock as well at the Joe. And some other final headlines across Alabama athletics. We look to men's tennis. Congratulations to Filip Planishek, the SEC Newcomer of the Year. He's also been named to the NCAA Championship singles draw, so we're excited for Filip with what's coming up there. Volleyball team, Rashinda Reed continues to round out her coaching staff as Sarah Bond has been hired as the operations coordinator for women's volleyball. Women's tennis, we know they'll be appearing in the NCAA tournament coming up Friday, and also the women's golf team gearing up for the NCAA Regional in Nashville coming up Monday through Wednesday of next week. So congratulations to Coach Mick Potter and the Crimson Tide. Best of luck with what is ahead in Nashville. What's ahead, though, on this show? Of course, we'll be visiting first with the head softball coach for the University of Alabama in Patrick Murphy, seeing where Alabama softball is at this point of the season. Just one regular season series is left, home against Missouri this week, and then after that, SEC championships, the tournament coming up in Gainesville, hopefully an NCAA regional and super regional, and then on to the Women's College World Series. So much to look forward to, and I think you'll enjoy this conversation with Alabama head coach Patrick Murphy. Roll Tide, Murphy. How's everything going? Congratulations.
Hey, thanks, Roger. It's great to see you. And thanks to Tuscaloosa Toyota for the sponsorship. I know there's great people out there.
Certainly are. And for you, I know this has got to be an exciting week. Can you believe this is the final regular season series coming up of the year this weekend?
No. And, I listened to you over the weekend when you guys were at USC. And, it's the weirdest thing ever when we have a bye weekend and we don't play, at the end of April. And so, I went to a high school tournament and I watched Bama baseball. That was just like, gosh, what am I doing? It's like, it's just a weird feeling not to be playing, but I think it's going to really help us. I gave everybody 3 days off and it came at a perfect time because, you've done baseball all your life. And I've heard so many major leaguers when they ask the question, when did you feel good or when do you feel good? And the answer has always been on opening day. And after that, it's just like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And the same goes for softball, because there's so many days of practice and so many days of weights and games and everything. And at the end of the year, I know a lot of them are sore and tired, and it's finals week this week. So I think the bye weekend came at a perfect time. They can get their studies done and just get ready to play Missouri this weekend.
The last time I saw you was Alabama's midweek doubleheader against UNA and then Alcorn State. And then after that, some time on the road for the Crimson Tide in College Station, as well as at Western Kentucky. Just what did you take away from those 4 games since you guys have last been at the Rhodes House?
Well, Western Kentucky, we do those trips for our seniors. It's a home visit. And one of the things, if your daughter played for me, Roger, I would say, I'm going to do my best to go to your hometown at least once during your career, where all your friends and family can get in a car and drive 20 minutes instead of get on a plane to fly to Tuscaloosa, because we do have a lot of kids from out of state. So, and it's just been a really good tradition, and it's a cool thing. And we went to the Tao house, great dinner, grandma, grandpa, niece, sister, brother, high school coaches, just you name it. And it's just a really, really neat thing. And all the kids get to see where Kaylee grew up. And we go to her hometown, and then we drove over to Bowling Green, where Western Kentucky is. And of course, they sold out. And I don't know if you saw any of the highlights, but their stadium was packed. But one of the coolest things, and I don't think I've ever seen it at too many parks, they have a parking deck that ran all the way from left field to basically center field, and 7 to 8 stories, but every story was full of people watching. And I think the poor public address announcer said 5 times during the game, do not put your legs over the ledge of the floor, because literally, if you're on the 7th floor, that's a pretty big fall if you were to have an accident. So it was funny, because every time you'd say it, all our team just, looked out in the left field to see how many people were breaking the rules. But a packed house, it's basically a win-win for softball. The only thing that didn't happen is we didn't win the stupid game. They played really well. We just didn't come up with a big hit. And, those things are going to happen. And then A&M, they had 2 record crowds. Friday night and Saturday night. They had their number 1 crowd ever at College Station in this brand new park. Saturday, they broke the record again. And for us, it's a good thing, because, you're going to play, like, we're going to go to Gainesville. And if we happen to have to play Florida for the SEC tournament, it's going to be a big crowd. And regional, super regionals, World Series, you name it. And I think just the more times we're in that type of atmosphere, the better for us.
Right now, as you get ready for Missouri, and then, like you mentioned, what is ahead for this group, regionals, super regionals, and hopefully the Women's College World Series, just what kind of consistency are you looking for starting with your lineup?
Well, number one in high level softball and baseball, I think it's almost the same. You got to get a really good start from your pitcher. He or she has to keep you in the game in order to win the game. They have to hold the opponent down long enough until you can score. And, we've had really, really good starts almost every single game, which we've been really lucky for. Second thing is you got to play high level defense. You can't give up 4 or 5 outs an inning and have error upon error and mental mistakes. So you got to play clean defense. And then hopefully, and as well as anybody else, the hardest part of this is the third thing is get a key hit. And, time and time again, usually bases loaded, 2 outs, 1 out, whatever, a ball in the gap, you're going to put up a crooked number, and you scoring in 1 inning usually wins the game for you. So if you can put up 5, 6 runs in 1 inning, you're probably going to win. And that key hit, and you try to practice it, you try to replicate pressure in a game. It's the toughest thing for me to replicate, because I don't have 4,000 people screaming, especially if we're on the road. So you just hope that whoever's up to bat has that clutch gene. And it's the coolest thing ever when somebody does come through. And then, you hope Montana or Alexi or Jayla or Alexander Salter does the rest on the mound. So if we can do those three things, get a good start, play great team defense, and get the key hit, that's the recipe for wins in the postseason.
Did you like the energy you saw from the team as you've gotten back together at the stadium this week, getting ready for what's coming up this weekend?
Yeah, and especially, we lose the first two games at A&M. First game could have gone either way, should have won it. Second game, not a good game. Third game, we come back, play great. Tough atmosphere on the road. Gritty win. I was really pleased with that. And then after the Western Kentucky game, I said, hey, you're going to get Thursday, Friday, Saturday off. And then I looked at Savannah Woodard, who's a junior, and I said, what happens when you get that many days off? And immediately she says, you bring really good energy to the next practice. And she knew it. Almost everybody that was in the circle that was a returner, they knew it. And we practiced for 3 hours on Sunday. It was a great day, good weather, and it was just a really good day to practice. And this week, with finals going on, we had to work around some things, but Monday was our day off. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. This is, a friend of mine called me last night, I guess, and said, do you realize you've only had 7 days of practice in the month of April? And I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. And even like today, when we get to the field, our grounds crew, Andrew Batts, looks at me, he goes, man, I've missed you guys. And he said, it's been 10 days since we were on the Rhodes House field. And, I guess when you're in the grind of it or whatever, and you're on the road and, you take a day off and you go back on the road and then, you get those 3 days off, it was 10 days. So these 4 days of practice are probably going to do the best for us than anything has in a long time.
And what can you tell us about this Missouri team that's coming to town this weekend?
They're on a roll, of course. I think they've won 7 in a row. They swept Kentucky at Kentucky, scored a ton of runs, hit a ton of home runs, won a midweek game, went home. They had their senior weekend this past weekend, and they swept A&M. I think one of the games was real close, and then the other two, not so much. And again, they've been hitting the ball. They got power throughout their lineup. Maybe not as fast as us, but big bats. They have a deep pitching staff. And then the complete opposite of us, we honor the opposing team's seniors as well on senior day, and we honor them first, and then we do our seniors. They have 8 and we have 1. And, we're going to honor Kaylee Tao this weekend as our lone senior. And then we have a graduate assistant, Megan Garst, and 2 senior managers that have been just awesome, Caleb Toshkoff and Will Hayes. So we'll honor the 3 managers before we get to Tao, and then, we'll have a really good ceremony for them. So Missouri's, they're as hot as anybody in the country. They're back in the top 25, and probably a team that nobody wants to face right now.
I think in every interview we've done, and even in this one, you mentioned growing the sport of softball. And last year, one of the great stories was James Madison and the run they had all throughout the Knoxville Regional, all the way to the Women's College World Series. And got some really sad news for them that their catcher, Lauren Burnett, lost her life this past week. They made the decision not to continue their season. And Alabama, of course, responded by saying, you have all the support from Tuscaloosa, but just how tough is it hearing about this situation and talking with your student athletes about what's going on?
Oh, it was very sad. And, they're one of my favorite coaching staffs in the country. And we've respected that school for so long. I started my career at a mid-major at Louisiana Lafayette, and JMU, they gave hope to every mid-major in the country last year. I mean, it was, obviously we were at the World Series as well, but shoot, I was a fan of theirs and their players, the way they played. They ended up playing Oklahoma 3 times. And, the first time they knocked them to the losers bracket. So it was just a sad situation. I feel really bad for everybody. And obviously you're praying for the family of the young lady and then all her teammates and her coaches, the whole gamut of emotions. And, we had a all staff meeting today at Alabama. And, one of the things that we did talk about was resources for not only student athletes, but staff as well. And I mean, the slide that they showed was as long as it could be in terms of resources. And, we tell our kids all the time, anything you need, you come to one of us, you come to our athletic trainer. There's so many people that would literally do anything and everything to help them. And we want them to make sure that their value as a person is 100 times more than their value as an athlete. And I'll tell every kid at Alabama, every sport, doesn't matter, football, baseball, basketball, soccer, anybody, that goes for every athlete and every young athlete that might be listening to this. Your value as a person is number one. So don't put any self-esteem, don't put anything in terms of your batting average, your ERA, whatever. It's you as a person first, what's in your heart. And I hope our kids 100% believe that, because, we try to tell them that all the time.
It's incredibly well said. Thank you for mentioning that, and go from something sad to something happy to kind of close out this interview. This is a busy time of the year, as we've mentioned, with you trying to close out the regular season the right way against Missouri at home in Tuscaloosa. But we know you'll be busy as well coming up Saturday night in Birmingham as you get inducted to the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame. Just what does that mean to you, and also to softball in this state getting that recognition?
Oh, it's unbelievable. And, I still am not sure how the heck it happened. Because when the phone call came, one of my assistant coaches answered. It was Ryan I. Murray, and she just said, "Hey Murph, it's the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame." And so she gives me the phone, and I literally thought he was going to ask for Haley McClinney's phone number or contact information. And afterwards we joked about it, and she said, "Man, I wish I would have videotaped that, because how when Derek Jeter got into the Baseball Hall of Fame, his family videotapes him getting the phone call." And just unbelievably humbled and honored. And I never ever would have guessed, after we played at a city park, Roger, for 3 years when I first got here. The manager and I would put up the portable fence every single day, and thank God my courtesy car was a truck, and we would load it up in the back of the truck. His name is Eric Moeller. He's still one of my best friends to this day. His brother played baseball, Chris Moeller, at Alabama, and just one of the finest people I've ever met. And literally every day I would drive half of it. He'd take the fence out, put it up, and then he'd get in my truck and I'd take the other half, and we'd go from center field to all the way around. And that was a daily occurrence for 2 years. And, to go from that to the Rhodes House, to 4,000 people at games, to selling out 20 games this year. It really goes to show you how far our sport has grown, not only in Alabama, but across the country. And it is a short time. This is only 26 years. So the level of play, the facilities, everything, it's just gone through the roof. And, it's going to be a fun night. The whole team gets to go. I got my mom and 3 sisters in Iowa in town, and some of my favorite people in the world are going to be there. So it'll be a really fun night.
Well, we're excited for you. We're all proud of you, and congratulations again. That's a great honor.
I appreciate you mentioning that.
Absolutely. Well, just thank you so much for the time you've given us. And I guess we'll get on the horn to Johnson City, Tennessee, get ready for Alabama at ETSU coming up in 2044. So when I guess I have a future daughter playing for you, but that sounds really good. And again, just thank you for all your time this week. Roll Tide.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Roger. Roll Tide.
Big congratulations to Coach Murphy, again, one of the newest members of the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame. We look forward to that coming up on Saturday, as well as the games coming up at the Rhodes House this weekend. And don't forget, as you're watching here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network Facebook page, you can come right back here to watch the booth cam for those games coming up with Tom Canterbury and Gray Robertson calling all the action of Alabama softball. I'll be over at Sewell Thomas Stadium this weekend calling some Crimson Tide baseball along with Lee Tracy and Chris Stewart, and we'll be calling more dazzling plays by Andrew Pinckney. We saw that even last weekend when the Crimson Tide were on the road in Columbia, South Carolina against the Gamecocks, as Pinckney is putting together just highlight reel play after highlight reel play, whether it's great hits, home runs, or when he's making great catches in the outfield and right field, throwing out runners on the base paths. He has been just one of the best stories of this Alabama baseball season so far this year, so we thought it was a good time to catch up with Alabama outfielder Andrew Pinckney. First of all, Pink, how's the season going for you?
Season going pretty good. Just trying to go out there and win games and, just put competitive at-bats together. And, it's going pretty good. Just trying to play hard, and that's what I'm doing. So,
what can you tell us about your approach at the plate right now?
I'm really just trying not to get cheated by the fastball. When I had struggles in the past, I was, taking fastballs really in the count and getting down in 0-1, 0-2 counts. So I'm just trying to stay aggressive and just take the fastball to right center and let everything else take care of itself.
And we've seen you, of course, this season have some power, some home runs for the Crimson Tide. Is that something you're looking to do, or are you mostly just focused on hitting the ball hard?
Yeah, of course, everybody wants to hit home runs. I don't know. It's not something I've really been trying to intentionally do. It's just been sort of trying to hit the ball hard, and sometimes it gets elevated and it leaves the yard, or I just put a really good swing on it and I show more power than I thought I had. So it's just more of a consequential thing of me just trying to barrel up balls rather than trying to lift the ball or trying to hit home runs.
Baseball is such an up and down sport. We've seen the Crimson Tide play really well at times this season, some long winning streaks, some tough losing streaks as well. Just how do you guys try to manage inside the clubhouse the ups and downs the season can bring?
Yeah, it's important to kind of just manage the emotions of all that. You can get really high and really low. It's important to just, stick to the same thing, stick to your same mindset going into every game, and just trying to take each game, one game at a time, because you start thinking ahead or looking back, it gets all lost in the shuffle. So just keeping the same neutral mindset every day and just going out there and just playing hard I feel like it's the best way to kind of combat that.
Well, again, we've seen some good performance for you at the plate so far this season, but also when you're playing in the outfield, whether it's in right field, whether it's in center field, people have been taking notice of your strong throwing arm, getting some out on the base paths. Just how much fun is that when you look back and you see that people are really celebrating what you can do in the outfield, not only making a great catch, but also throwing out people either at third base or at home?
Yeah, it's just really fun, in the SEC, I feel like with the corner outfielders, everybody thinks that they're just guys that can hit and can't really throw or play defense. So it gives you a lot of opportunities to kind of, people a lot of times test me with my arm, and, I've been able to do that my whole life. So just throwing it as hard as I can and just making a good throw, I'm pretty confident I can get it out there. So
your teammates saying to you what everyone is on Twitter saying, like, oh, not on Pink, or, don't run on Pink. Does that happen a lot when you get back in the dugout after a throw like that?
That's kind of funny because, they see me do that in practice a lot, and when taking it out, I try to air it out a little bit and make a strong throw. So they've all seen me do it. So it's more of a please run, so we can get it out. So.
Well, that's pretty exciting. So with your strong throwing arm, have you ever pitched before in your career?
In high school, I pitched a little bit. Not really to the point where I could throw strikes or anything like that. I hit a lot of batters and walked a lot of guys. So it was more of I threw hard, so they just threw me in there and I got a couple outs. But it wasn't ever a starting pitcher kind of thing.
Well, speaking of your high school playing days, I understand you also played basketball. What kind of basketball player were you?
Yeah, I like to think of myself as kind of like an athletic two-guard. Just really played good defense, and I had my spots. I was good at the corner three, had a good little mid-range game. So scoring the basketball wasn't necessarily my strongest suit, but if you got me in the right spot, I could light up the scoreboard a little bit.
Any of your high school teammates go on to play college basketball, or anyone you played against that our fans may know about?
Yeah, actually, I played with Jordan Lyons. He was a senior when I was a freshman. He was at Furman. He put up 30 against Alabama like 2 years ago. So that's the only guy that's played against the Tide so far. But, a couple guys that went like D2, JUCO ball, that sort of thing. So, but he's definitely the biggest name.
Well, that's certainly good to hear about. And for you, of course, starting to play baseball and basketball as a youngster, was your dad a big influence? He was a great college player at Grambling.
Yeah, my dad always told me like, you can play basketball, but I just can't teach you it. Um, I played baseball since I was able to walk, so that was definitely like my main thing. And I just kind of picked up basketball because my friends were playing it, and it was just fun. So it was just fun to stay in shape and be ready for baseball season. But the whole time I was just ready for baseball season to come around. So
And of course, growing up around Atlanta, just youth baseball and then high school baseball is so competitive. How did that make you a better baseball player?
I think it's just kind of helps me with the dealing with the crowds and these big crowds in the SEC because going to like South Georgia or North Atlanta to play baseball, it's like lots of people come to play or come to watch, and it's just the environments are pretty comparable to what we see at Mississippi State or Ole Miss, and I think just kind of being able to manage that and manage your emotions with loud crowds and people yelling at you has just kind of helped me out there.
Are you seeing a lot of those guys as you play throughout the SEC or even some non-conference games that Alabama plays in?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I'll look at the roster and be like, oh, I played against this guy, or I remember him, or he struck me out, or whatever. So it's just like I don't know. It's a chance to kind of either get back at him or kind of keep going how I beat him last time. So.
And sticking with you and your high school days, starting to think about playing some college baseball, what made Alabama stand out? And what can you tell us as well about your family connection to Alabama?
Yeah, so my mom was born in Tuscaloosa and I was born in Tuscaloosa. So we kind of grew up Tide fans, and I knew it was definitely a place I wanted to go. And, I had other, interests in other places, obviously. But, when Coach Bo called and I toured the place, it was just an easy decision that I instantly wanted to come here. So.
And we've heard from a lot of players that Coach Bo, the recruiter, is the exact same guy you get as the head coach. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I think so. He's definitely just like he's very, what you're going to get out of him. You know what I mean? Like, he brings the same kind of energy and mentality to the park every day. So it's definitely good to have that kind of consistency to know, like, all right, like you're going to practice knowing what you're going to get, and we're just going to show up and work hard and, try and put a season together,
And for you, looking back at your freshman year in 2020, you really didn't get to see much game action, had a lot of practice. I'm sure for you, you're anxious to get on the field, and then all of a sudden the season gets cut short very abruptly. How did you manage the emotions of everything in that 2020 season?
I think that honestly, like, really helped me to become who I am today. When quarantine hit, I just had a lot of time to myself, and I just kind of worked really hard, and I got to speak with a lot of like pro guys and college guys that had gotten sent home too. So just being able to work out with them and kind of get their advice and have them help me with my swing really, really helped me. And, then I got to go to the Northwoods that next summer, and, just really started to build some momentum. So
How much did that experience in the Northwoods League help you for what we're seeing this year?
it was awesome. I mean, I had lead off every day and got 250 at bats. I mean, you just can't get 250 at bats and not get any better, So it was just really good to be able to play every day and have to kind of go through that tough schedule so that, now I'm ready to play however many games in a row or whatever it may be. So.
Well, for you, you got to play a lot of right field, of course, this season, though, with William Hamiter being banged up sometimes you've been in center field. But I want to ask you about your time in right field when we're at home in Tuscaloosa. We got the right field Rangers right behind you. Do you guys talk much back and forth? Do they make you kind of tip your cap? Anything crazy like that while you're out there?
Gosh, I know it's kind of a weird relationship because Tommy was out there at first, and it was like they were loving Tommy, and I kind of got thrown out there, and they were like, well, "Where's Tommy? Like, we want Tommy." So I'm trying to work my way in there, trying to get their love a little bit. But I tip my cap every once in a while, try to interact with them. So I'm working my way in there, I think.
That's pretty good. But you're not doing the gritty after you catch a fly ball out like Tommy is.
Yeah, Tommy, he really wants me to do it. I'm struggling with it. I don't want to get caught on camera. That's a tough one. I don't know what to do about that.
Well, Tommy's been able to do that. And we've seen Caden Rose, he's been playing a lot next to, last year he had some incredible diving catches. This year he's had a few as well. What's it like to watch him make an athletic play like we've seen him make time in, time out?
Yeah, I mean, I know he can do it. So if I see a ball and I think, there's a chance, I'm telling him, like, go get it. Like, I'll just back you up. And if they get a double, then they get a double. Just keep trying to go get it. And, we can live with the outcome of that. And most of the time he makes the catch. So.
Certainly does. Well, Andrew, we still have 3 weeks left to go in SEC baseball before the SEC tournament. Just in your opinion, what's most important for this team right now? What's the focus of this group leading into this series against LSU?
Yeah, we just gotta just put the whole game together. A lot of times it's we play 8 good innings and then there's just one inning that kills us, or the pitching's really great and the hitting's not showing up, or whatever it may be. So just putting a whole game together for 9 innings is what we really need to just focus on. And when we do that, everything takes care of itself and we have a really good result. So.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Alabama against LSU coming up this weekend. We'll see Andrew Pinckney in the lineup for the Crimson Tide. Just Andrew, thank you so much for joining us and giving us this insights on your career and the Alabama baseball team. Roll Tide. Best of luck to you.
Roll Tide. Thank you.
Can't wait to see Andrew Pinckney and the Crimson Tide back in action coming up this weekend against LSU. Don't forget tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. And then Saturday night going to be a little later than normal at 7:30. And then a quick turnaround for the Sunday game at 1 o'clock as Alabama is still at home for 6 of the final 9 SEC games that remain. And really some important opportunities ahead for this Crimson Tide baseball team. So hopefully you can come out and cheer them on this weekend at Sewell Thomas Stadium or listen to us across the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Before we go on this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, we wanted to talk some Alabama footballs. We're a couple weeks removed now from the 2022 Golden Flake A-Day game at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Plus, last week we had the NFL Draft, which we really couldn't talk about since the first round was held after our show last week, so we wanted to get a draft breakdown as well from Nick Kelly, who covers Alabama football for the Tuscaloosa News, has even won a AP Sports Editors Award for outstanding beat coverage of Alabama football. So we wanted to visit with Nick Kelly, get his thoughts on not only spring practice, but the NFL Draft for the Crimson Tide football program. Nick, how's everything going as spring football is kind of in the rearview mirror and the school year may be coming to a close, but football season still feels like it's just around the corner?
It feels like it's always football season. Just, is it the field or the season that's on the field, or is it the season that's happening the off season in terms of roster changes and the draft? And there's always something going on, but that's what makes it fun too, is that it's really fairly nonstop.
It really is. And especially right now with the transfer portal and also name, image, and likeness stories, how much you keep an eye on that at this time of the year?
Yeah, I mean, both things, you can't help but keep an eye on it, and really 2 eyes, just because it's such a different time in college athletics where you're seeing these collectives popping up, these just new NIL kind of things happening. Of course, the transfer portal is you basically have these 2 almost Wild West scenarios popping up at the same time. So you have your choice of Wild West, so to speak, and so there's always guys who could be coming and going. The transfer portal, there could be some new collectives popping up in the country. I mean, there's just so much going on that at least for me, I mean, man, it can be hard to keep up nationally what's going on. Just every day it seems like there's some kind of new development or new story.
Yeah, sticking with those 2 issues for just a moment, how much has it changed in a year, especially since the NIL rights went into effect on July 1st of 2021? I've talked to some people that, we never talked about the word collective for the first few months that NIL was in existence, and now that's what everyone's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's constantly evolving, and that's the thing. These collectives are more formal versions of, okay, here's this third party that's helping facilitate these deals. Now, in terms of what those deals look like, and how much of it's above board, not above board, that varies by school, by place, by just there's just so many different things happening right now, and unfortunately, there's not much regulation to it. I mean, there's just not really a power of sorts that is overseeing all this. I mean, there's the NCAA, but they just have so little power involved in this. So it's really probably going to come down to the government's involvement at some point in talking at a national level. And of course, there's plenty of other things on the plate of the United States government, but I think it's what it's going to take, because really there's so few. I mean, there's rules, but it's such a new thing that there are just different developments all the time.
Well, that's a lot of the swirling around off the field for Alabama football. How about on the field over the past few weeks for spring practice? What do you feel like we learned about the Crimson Tide?
Yeah, I mean, this defense, I think, should be pretty good. Of course, anyone who watched the 8-day game saw how well that defense performed, especially the first team. And that's not a surprise. I mean, you have, of course, Will Anderson's back as the headliner, but you really have a group that's experienced and deep, and a defensive side of the ball that I think this is kind of been developing over the years. Obviously, they've it's a different area of college football where you're not seeing those 10 points or less kind of performances defensively, but this defense could maybe be a little more reminiscent of past teams defensively. Maybe not the exact same point totals, but just in terms of dominating defensive play and a defense that really makes a lot of fun plays too. Just really fun to watch. And so I think that defense we certainly learned is ahead of the offense to certain extents, but also have to cut that offense a little bit of slack when you lose a good number of guys like you did in Evan Neal, Brian Robinson. We just saw them in the draft this past weekend, where of course you have James Williams, John Mechie, Slade Bolden. I mean, just a lot of faces that were big contributors for that team last year. And of course, having Bryce back is a big deal. And of course, when your quarterback is the carryover, and not only the same quarterback, but a guy who won the Heisman Trophy last year, you're going to be in a decent spot. But it does take time for things like that to gel. And when you have new receivers, you have a new running back and Jahmyr Gibbs, it's just going to take some time. So maybe early on in the year, this defense might have to help this offense a little bit. But I think as the year goes on, there's so much talent on the offensive side of the ball that you're going to see both sides contributing. And this is going to be a really good team.
Going back to the defense for a moment, like you mentioned, Will Anderson Jr. certainly looks like he continues to improve upon what is already some of the best defensive play you're going to find in college football. But how much does it help to have the emergence of a Dallas Turner or Chris Braswell? How much does that add to what he's trying to do?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, with those guys firing all cylinders, I mean, if you're an offense, who do you try to block? I mean, you almost have to double team Will because most tackles cannot handle him by themselves. But then that's going to leave a lot of opportunities for Dallas Turner, for Chris Braswell, for guys in the defensive line that could emerge as well. And so, yeah, I think if you're the Crimson Tide, you're awfully happy about the depth that you have there. Now, as we were reminded at several positions last year, that depth can quickly disappear with injuries. But right now, they're in a very good spot. And of course, you have some younger guys too, like Jeremiah Alexander, five-star recruit added to this year's class as an earlier enrollee. We got to see a little bit of him in the spring game. And so they've got some great depth there. And when you have guys on both sides of the defense that are relentless, that's pretty tough as an offense.
Well, for the Alabama offense, you mentioned the steady play we continue to see out of Bryce Young. What did you think getting to see a couple of transfer portal pieces for the first time in an Alabama jersey, both with Jahmyr Gibbs at running back and also Jermaine Burton transferring from Georgia to Alabama as a wide receiver?
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, starting with him, I mean, he adds that scary speed. You talk about losing a guy like Jameson Williams, who he had that scary speed. He has that speed that defenses really are trying to prevent from taking over a game, because all it takes is one play and he's gone. And that's similar with Jahmyr Gibbs. We saw with the 75-yard touchdown run that he had. And now, of course, they play different positions and it's different expectations for those guys. But I mean, you need guys like that on offense. That Nick Saban talked about at that coaches conference back in January, where there's some clips that came out from that where he talked about, hey, we had guys that they could not guard. We had a great quarterback play. And look what a difference that made. So when they lost those guys, it was a lot harder for them offensively. I still have that quarterback back, of course, but they need to add some more guys who have that scary speed and have that just next level. I mean, you can scheme or you can out scheme other teams, but if you just have guys who are better athletes, who just, if the ball is in their hand, they can beat you one-on-one. I mean, that's tough to beat. There's not a whole lot you can do, because I mean, Jameson Williams so many times would have the ball in the open field and it looked like guys had good angles of pursuit. Next thing you know, he's gone. And so adding a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs is huge. Jermaine Burton, Saban's talked about how he was one of the most consistent guys at the position in the spring. And of course, so he's going to be a big piece of the offense, very reliable, I think, for Bryce Young. And we saw a few connections in that game. I think he had 3 receptions for that offense. Of course, Bryce didn't have a ton of time. So maybe with some more time, they'll find each other even more. But of course, adding Tyler Harrell in the transfer portal as well, I think could add some more of that scary speed to this offense. Now, I don't know if we can put Jameson Williams expectations on Tyler at this point, but you got to love adding a guy with speed who can just take the top off that defense.
What do you think is next for this offensive line?
Good question. I mean, of course, adding Tyler Steen is a big thing before the season. So we'll see how he progresses. And Nick Saban's not really probably adding these guys via the transfer portal, sit on the bench. So Tyler Steen's got probably a good shot to start. And yeah, just seeing what works best, which guys fit in which positions best. And a guy like J.C. Latham, for him to continue to develop is important too, because he's a 5-star guy, someone who I've heard a lot of good things about. And so his continued development is important. And also that interior, just kind of cement that You have some experience there with Darren Dalcourt and Seth McLaughlin at the center position, and the guard spots are two more experienced players in Javion Cohen and Emil Achior. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how that final group plays out. But they've got some good pieces to work with. That's another group that just takes time to gel. I mean, you really just have to work together, and you learn how to build off working with the guy who's next to you. And so I think they just need time together. They need more reps. But adding a guy like Tyler Steen, I think is going to be fairly helpful.
And looking forward for this football team once they do come back for our fall camp coming up the beginning of August. What are the most important steps that a program can take between this time of the year, as we talk in early May, and when they return to the practice field in August?
Yeah, I just think it's finding ways to continue to build that conditioning and team bonding, and also learning the system. I mean, for guys who are new, when you're talking about adding these new defensive players, adding these new offensive players via the transfer portal, I think they're up to 5 now, and yeah, of course, when you have talent, that tends to go a long way. But also, if you're from a different system, that takes time for you to learn what the new team expects, what the new team needs, and just what it's like to play in the new defense. Like Henry To'oTo'o had the bit of an advantage in that he played under Jeremy Pruitt, who ran a similar system to what they're running at Alabama, and so he was able to transition more easily. But there still is that just transition period. So I think for the newer guys, whether it be the transfer guys or the younger players who are new recruits that sign, I think it's just building that knowledge base, so that when you are actually back on the field, you know what you're supposed to be doing. Because if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, that slows you down quite a bit. I don't care how fast you are, how athletic or strong you are. If you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, you're not going to be in the right spot, and you're not going to be able to make as many plays. So I think it's just getting ready as mentally as much as they can, and resting up before the season. They have a few guys who need to get healthy, like Ja'Cory Brooks, who have not been able to practice in the spring, and they'll obviously want them in the fall.
So the Crimson Tide, of course, wrapped up spring practice April 16th with a Golden Flake A-Day game at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and then really all attention turned to the NFL draft that was held this past weekend in Las Vegas. What were some of your big takeaways from Alabama in the NFL draft in 2022?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lighter year, but the funny thing is, for a lighter year for Alabama, it's still 7 guys drafted. Of course, this was Georgia's year in terms of, I mean, that was their team. That was the team that many thought if they're ever going to win a championship with Kirby, that's going to be the team. They did. And they also, you saw that kind of in the draft as well, where they set the record for most guys drafted in one class. So yeah, I think for Alabama, obviously this was not maybe the complete headliner year that 2020 was, in a way, with the 6 first-round picks, but they did have a few kind of significant milestones. First off, Nick Saban crossed the 40 barrier for first-round picks at Alabama, up to 41 now, I believe. They also set the record for most draft picks from one roster, that 2017 team. And so, yeah, just all kinds of and then they also, I think, tied I don't have all these written down just based off my memory here. I think they also tied the streak for most drafts for the first round pick up to 14 now. So still some, again, not quite as maybe jaw dropping of a draft, but still some really big numbers for this team.
Anytime an Alabama player was drafted, you were quick to tweet out a link to an article on TuscaloosaNews.com about that player, the full profile, plus how they could fit with some of their new teams. Anybody you feel like is really a great fit just on paper right off the bat with some of these new organizations?
That's a good question. I guess I haven't thought a ton about it, but I mean, Evan Neal is going to fit well. New York needs another tackle, and they have some pieces there. They just need some better blocking, some more linemen. And for a guy who's just as ready as he is for the NFL, I mean, that's an early one that comes to mind just because of that. But also, I mean, Phil Mathis, I mean, look, you got some other guys on that Washington defensive line who he knows well and Alabama fans know well. And I think that's going to help his transition. And he's a guy who I think contribute early. So, yeah. And then, of course, for the receivers, it all comes down to their health. But if Jameson and John are both healthy, I think they both could also be valuable pieces for their teams early on.
Well, Crimson Tide football again has wrapped up spring practice. The NFL draft is in the books. So what's next for Nick Kelly? Any special projects you're working on for the Tuscaloosa News in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of transitioning toward the summer, there's a little more time to tell some bigger stories and just, pause or take a breath, as you and I were talking about off air, so to speak, and just a time to kind of think about what we want to write about. And so, yeah, we'll see what kind of comes out the next few weeks and few months as we get ready for the season.
Look forward to it. The award-winning Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News. Nick, just thank you so much for joining us, talking all things Alabama football. Look forward to reading your work once again in the Tuscaloosa News. But thank you for joining us.
Roger, great to be with you.
Again, Nick Kelly does great work covering Alabama football for the Tuscaloosa News. Make sure you follow his stories coming up over the next few weeks as we, again, keep getting deeper into the offseason. And before you know it, it's going to be time for some practice reports coming up in early August. But this weekend, for sure, we know the story will be baseball and softball here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network as we'll take a look at this weekend's schedule. We'll start with the baseball team and the softball team both at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, starting their series against the Tigers. We have a weekend full of Tigers in town for graduation weekend. Softball against Missouri, baseball against LSU. And then on Saturday, the softball team is playing earlier at 12:30, in large part because Patrick Murphy is headed to the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame later that night in Birmingham, and then later that night as well in Tuscaloosa, game 2 of the series between Alabama baseball against the LSU Tigers. And then on Sunday, 1 p.m. start time again for both softball and baseball. Softball against Mizzou, that wraps up the regular season. Baseball against LSU, still 2 weeks of the regular season for the baseball team after that game is complete. And don't forget all the softball games that are coming up this weekend against Missouri. Here on the CTSN Facebook page, we will have a booth cam available. Tom Canterbury, Ray Robertson calling all the action of Alabama softball. You can watch them call the game coming up all weekend long right back here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. And that's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. We certainly want to say thank you to our friends at Tuscaloosa Toyota for sponsoring this show. Check them out online at TuscaloosaToyota.com. Thanks as well to Patrick Murphy, the head coach of the softball team, Andrew Pinckney, Alabama outfielder, as well as Nick Kelly of the Tuscaloosa News for joining us on the show today. Thanks as well to our producer, Ethan Carabin, for putting this show together. For everybody at the Crimson Tide Sports Network, this is Roger Hoover saying thank you for watching. We'll be back again coming up next week with another 2 p.m. edition of Crimson Drive, driven by Tuscaloosa Toyota. Also should have a Greg Byrne live episode coming up on Wednesday of next week as well. So for the very latest, just stay right here to the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Good afternoon and roll Tide.